Hello. Welcome, folks, to the webinar. Thanks so much for tuning in today. The focus of today's talk will be giving you an overview in the sort of checklist format of many key decisions and landmarks you need to hit when planning and launching and optimizing your self-publishing experience. I'm Christoph. I've been here for 13 years. And I've worked on over 2,000 books to date. So I've seen just about every sort of book that you can imagine. So if I don't have the answer to your question, someone I know probably does. I'm passionate about children's books as a father of two young boys. And for my own reading, I tend to gravitate towards science fiction and fantasy these days mostly. If you're not familiar with what we do here at FriesenPress, we are an employee-owned publishing service provider founded in 2009, and we've helped over 11,000 authors self-publish their books. Our support ranges from professional book coaching to editing and design to worldwide distribution and book promotion support. My friend and moderator, Brian Cliffin over here, he's going to be helping out on the sides. So if you have any questions, we can save those for the key question period at the end there. And otherwise, if you need anything, you can just pop your hand up and we'll note that for later. As to the end of the presentation, I'll be sending out a PDF as well with sort of self-publishing checklist and some more information. And that'll also have a replay of the session. So if you missed out or if you want to share it with other folks, you can. And so that email will go out tomorrow. So don't worry about taking too much by way of meticulous notes. And with that said, pop into it. So the agenda as it were today, in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the many stages and facets of self-publishing as a process, from the humble beginnings of planning your book and discovery to how to write and or publish, and then to having your first box of books that you open on your own, fully set up YouTube channel. So first I'll detail how to plan your journey, including some topics as budgeting and goal setting for your publishing project. Next, we go into preparing your manuscript for publication, and as well like standards and best practices. After that, we've got the importance of investing in editing and book design. And that might seem self-evident, but not everybody sees the necessary value of an edit. So we can kind of elucidate what that looks like as well. And then optimizing your book's discoverability, market edge, and unique selling features. After we get that done, we'll be into layout, which is my favorite part because that's where you get to see your book come to life. That's typically when things like galley proofing are done. So you'll have potential digital or physical samples of your book, and then determining how that book eventually is distributed and the pricing strategy around that as a product. Lastly, we then go into reviewing some of the fine details before you finally send it off on its way out into the world and your book is published. Once we wrap that, we go into some Q&A, and we'll post a link for the free editor's manuscript evaluation giveaway as well. It's worth $500, so it does have a small caveat or asterisk beside it that it's good for up to 50,000 words. In the event that you win it and it's a little bit bigger, there's just a small overage associated with it. That being said, we'll get into the meat and potatoes. So, planning your journey. Embarking on your self-publishing journey is like setting out on some sort of adventure. And you'll need to plan and guide to be successful in that. As you chart your course, defining your basic plan will help find the best publishing path for you and your book. A little preparation and forethought is going to help you a great deal in your journey. We've broken down kind of the 4 different stages or planning steps. So one is really fundamental, but determining your budget. Before we're going into anything, it's how much does this cost? And what are the kind of footprints for each of the different associated parts, being editing, design, artwork and illustrations, licenses, if applicable. It's, if you're using things like quotes or reference materials or images that you've grabbed from some kind of archive, for example. Consider your publishing goals. Now, a lot of the time, authors who are starting out with their writing, they might consider their publishing goals later, and they just write like I do, which is more for fun and hobby. But the thing about planning to publish is it's not as personal as it is a commercial endeavor. And with this, you want to be looking at, is this for friends and family, local history project, or is it something more ambitious like starting a writing career, or enacting a public policy reform, or making debut as a public speaker? Who is your target readership? What are they buying? And what are their reading habits like? The next piece would be to decide on the formats you want to publish. Paperback, hardcover, ebook, audiobook? Yes to all. Do you eventually want this to be adapted as, say, a screenplay or in different languages like French or Italian? The last piece there would be to choose your preferred self-publishing path. And there's a bazillion different ways to do that. It can be tricky because there's a lot of nuance to publishing, like, say, music or film. And the publishing industry has changed so much since I started 13 years ago. And it continues to rapidly evolve even today. So, getting up to speed on some of these trends and best practices is something that I can speak to as well. Sales and marketing, et cetera, those are all key considerations for selecting your path. But foremost amongst them, in my opinion, is editing, because behind every great author is a very patient editor with a ever-flowing pot of coffee. There we go. So, determining your budget. Your budget is something that can be loosely defined as different stages, right? Stage one, the most important piece there is editing. Stage two might be designing your book and cover, and then it goes on from there. Your budget doesn't just determine how much you spend, though. It's shaping nearly every strategic decision you make moving forward. When we talk about sort of your ballpark budget, it's not just money, it's also your time and possibly your frustration. If you're a busy person and you've got a family or career or both, sometimes learning some of these programs can be challenging, right? There's whole university and college level courses for these sorts of things like design. So you can't do most of these things easily or quickly. You're investing a significant amount of time and energy if you're doing so. And for some authors, that's worth it. You might already have some of those skills. For others, outsourcing them makes a lot more sense. So that's where professionals come in. It's just like if you were to hire a roofer to do your roof versus doing it yourself. DIY or do it yourself can be tough. I think as technical skills go, like I mentioned, there's a myriad of different disciplines within publishing, and there's a lot of blind corners. So that's one aspect. The other is that you want to be aware that using AI for design or other components can cause major issues with things like copyright and so forth down the road. It's best to avoid AI, in my opinion, for this reason, because things like copyright are so precious and important to your work and its integrity. So I would generally recommend either you hire a professional or roll up your sleeves and do it yourself, or find somebody that maybe can take it on for you. Consider your publishing goals. Like myself, I've written for mostly my own enjoyment and those of my friends and family. Like I write fantasy for my friends to nerd out on because I'm a dungeon master. I play tabletop games. But for some people, they're writing for posterity and to set the record straight or something else. But regardless, when you're writing, it's often personal. But when you go to publish, it becomes commercial. And it's important to look at those two bridging points in your writing decision, because once you have finished a book or you are indeed planning to publish it, you then need to define why and how. Clarifying your objectives will help guide key decisions about things like book formatting, marketing strategy, and your ideal process. For some authors, this process may involve a lot of market research about comparable titles to better understand the composition and the composition of the market. Why did you write the book? Who is this book for? And importantly, why might they, and by extension bookstores, want it? Publishing goals vary widely from author to author. Some folks never want to publish their books, and others want to build a long term writing career and generate consistent passive income. Others want to establish authority in a specific field or support a speaking career, preserve family history, or simply share a story with a specific audience. Each of these goals is legitimate, but also requires different approaches. Whilst there is no silver bullet for methodology, there are some that are tried, I think, and tested strategies and wisdom that's hard earned that you can, glom onto and carry through your story and your journey as an author. Start by asking yourself, what does success look like for this book? Selling thousands of copies nationwide? Using the book as a business card for credibility or client recruitment? Or is it perhaps being nominated for and or winning a literary award? That's a big one. A lot of people that I speak to are, wanting to meet that sort of high apogee of achievement, but it does take a gravel road to get there. So you want to decide on the format to which you publish. Deciding your book's formats early is key to having a smooth and somewhat linear publishing process. No bumps, no unexpected turns. Planning ahead allows you to coordinate the production and the release of your book, both in print or ebook, audiobook, potentially simultaneously. It gets pricey to do audiobooks, but it can be very worthwhile. Coordinating a simultaneous release across multiple formats can create momentum and increased visibility, which is really helpful in some circumstances. However, releasing everything at once is both not required and can be cost prohibitive, like I mentioned. So choosing to stagger that is often, in my experience, something that authors are well advised to do. You might publish print and ebook first and evaluate the performance and market response. Then from there, do a second edition a year later, and then perhaps do the audiobook around the same time. Additional formats and editions can always be added later. And the key thing there is working within a kind of no-nonsense pragmatism that I think is very good to engender in your writing career. Making format decisions early helps to avoid reworks. So for example, cover design requirements can sometimes differ between print and digital, and the sizing and shape and file output. A print cover includes a spine width and back cover design, while an ebook cover only requires the front image. Interior formatting also can differ substantially. So generally my recommendation would be have paperback, hardcover, and hopefully ebook upon the launch of your book for multi-platform support, right? It's like a shoe store. You don't want to just sell size 10 shoes because you'll only get size 10 customers. If you have something for everybody within your product range, then you'll be able to hit market saturation. Your target audience should also influence your decision. Consider how your readers typically consume books. For example, nonfiction audiences often embrace audiobooks, but they also enjoy hardcovers if they've got a certain degree of clout or credibility behind them. Mass market business books, obviously like The Wealthy Barber, for example, that I have on my desk, that's a paperback and a very established best-selling one. Children's books rely heavily on print presentation. Their high-quality print, emphasis on good illustrations and physical product is super key here. I think that much like with the emphasis on good editing, children's books really ride and die on how good the artwork is. Speaking both from my experience as a professional and a dad of two, a lot of the time the books that really stand out are going to be those that grab you viscerally, not just from the story, but the tangible value and ephemera of the artwork. Full color books are often a bit more tricky to navigate outside of, say, children's books. And what I mean by that is your photography, cookbooks, and other things like that. They tend to do best not aiming towards print on demand, but rather web press or offset press. Those are larger machines that handle better quality paper and ink and complex engineering. But to boil it all down, that is a use case for a particular kind of product that you want to think about early, because they're really good fit for certain types of production and not for print on demand, in my experience. So planning your journey further to that, determine your publishing path. Uh, we talked a bit about DIY, but to kind of get into some more of the kind of meat on that, DIY or do it yourself is very wide as a spectrum. You can hire professionals from Fiverr, Upworks, Etsy to come in and do a gig for editing, illustrations, and everything. You can micromanage the whole process and blow it all apart into its smaller pieces to kind of control at an individual piece level. You can upload to Amazon or to Ingram Spark, and those are often very effective for certain kinds of projects. Again, it's very similar to how you might look at any kind of project management, where what you put in is often what you get out. And the level of support that you get with DIY is generally fairly low, but it's also fairly accessible, relatively inexpensive. DIY expects an author to also wear all of the project components themselves, book cover design and so forth, to figure out these nuances or hire somebody to do them for them. Hybrid, by extension, is kind of an unusual middle ground now. These smaller publishing houses commonly split or supplement costs with their authors to produce books with professional advice and support. Hybrid publishers typically accept queries like traditional publishers, and they greenlight those authors they think are going to be a good fit for their brand. They usually involve a contract, however, that requires giving up rights of the book, ownership and or royalties, and an expectation that the author will pay upfront for some or all of the services. Lastly, publishing services are, I think, one of the more clear directions for authors from my own personal bias, which is that you aren't giving up your rights or ownership, and you are hiring a professional to produce a product for you and with you. But ultimately, you're still in the pilot seat. You're still in control. They can advise on impacts of your choices and have professionals in different areas and fields for you. And you can also get things like genre-specific editors who are expertise in your genre, so that you're not getting, Joe from down the road with a bachelor's degree. No offense to Joe. But unlike traditional publishers, you would also retain the rights, like I mentioned, and it's no nonsense, broadly speaking. You pay for services, you get those services, and the book is produced. So you maintain your copyright, your ownership, and language options and stuff like that down the road. And it doesn't preclude you from then eventually traditionally publishing. Before exploring any self-publishing path, you need to finish your manuscript. A lot of folks that I speak to are very early in their ideation process. They're thinking about possibly one day maybe writing a book. Got to write that book. It's the hardest thing to do, and it's the easiest thing to say you're going to do. I speak from my own experience. I have like 4 half-finished novels. Don't be me. So, if you have a writer's group or organization that you can join, very much a best practice. But once you have a rough draft, let's say, or you get a book coach, you're not just producing a piece of writing, you're preparing a product. And as unsexy as that sounds, that's destined for bookstore shelves, and it behaves as a commercial good, unless as something as precious as one might hope. So a polished manuscript is something that is somewhat of a foundation for your book's success. You want to make sure that out the gates, it's solid, it reads like it makes sense, and that there's not anything that would be a head scratcher for your potential readership. A well-developed manuscript signals professionalism. It minimizes the need for extensive corrections and can save you a lot of time and money. When you draft a clear and carefully revised manuscript, the editor can then concentrate on strengthening the structure and clarity and presentation without having to worry about kind of untangling the ball of yarn. That's not necessarily the end of the world. Editors can be extraordinarily patient, and they can do a lot of heavy lifting, but it's something of a collaborative process that will require that you put in the best you can to get out the best you can. Here are 4 ways to prepare for your manuscript. So ensure your manuscript is original, cite your sources, conduct a thorough self-edit, and ensure your manuscript is properly formatted. So ensuring your manuscript's properly original is difficult because, as Shakespeare once famously opined, there's only like, I think it was like 5 or 6 different types of stories, in the human literary world. Now, maybe that's true, but there's probably some nuance behind it. But trying to make sure that you are going for something that asks a unique question. It's proposing something new. Might be remixed, it might be something different, but it's not fanfic, for example. Distributors screen for content duplication on their platforms, and they may remove your book if there's a duplicative kind of content. This is also particularly important for AI. That's come up basically every day of the week for me lately, and it's tough because it's a great tool, but it can create a lot of problems for you. So steer clear of that. It was my advice. Cite your sources. Proper citations ensure that any external ideas or quotes are clearly credited to the original source. This not only acknowledges the work of others, but it also helps to protect you from some potential legal and ethical concerns. Copyright infringement and plagiarism are a big problem. In some cases, particularly when using longer excerpts or images or protected material, you may also need to obtain written permission from the publisher and author. This is just a good best practice to make sure that you're not getting yourself in hot water. Get permission for image use in particular. Grabbing stuff from Wikipedia or Creative Commons or whatnot is often a bit of a minefield because there's not an easy way to determine that it is indeed open source, aside from going to like the actual Creative Commons website or free royalty images. So grabbing it from Wikipedia or Google search images, no bueno. Conduct a thorough self-edit. So once you've completed your draft and run a basic spell check, the next logical step is give yourself a break. Give yourself a pat on the back, take a walk, make a cup of tea, stare out the window. You've made it. Your book is alive. It's finished. Now, the most important thing you can do is take a break. This is something that a lot of authors struggle with, and I see happen all the time, where folks get stuck in like an editorial vortex. They're always going back for that one more revision, that one more change. And it can happen for years, and people can burn out or lose love with their book, and then it just hits the shelf, like some of my stuff. So when you revisit the manuscript after an absence, pay attention to clarity, flow, and consistency. Do the characters' dialogues make sense with their character from chapters 1 to 7? Are there any continuity errors? Are we looking at blue eyes in one chapter and green in another? That's something that a self-edit may get you if you've put the appropriate time into letting your brain cool down after the rather substantive exercise of creating a book. Look for gaps, repetitive phrasing, narrative stalls, and things like that. And don't be afraid to take notes. That's something that I think a lot of authors in doing a revision are wise to do, is they have a little notebook on their side that maybe asks questions of themselves to revisit. Ensure your manuscript is properly formatted. This is fairly straightforward to a degree, paragraph breaks, white space, not too dense, not too scattered, right? It should be something that you as a reader don't have to strain your eyes to see, and it can be followed somewhat clearly. Complex layouts like your textbooks, cookbooks kind of stuff, those can be a bugbear, but there are definitely good style guides out there, particularly at the local Writers Association level, where they might even have workshops on this. So definitely check that out. And worst case scenario, you can talk to an editor. A professional is very well advised in this case. One thing that I particularly like is beta reading, alpha reading, and sort of sensitivity reading. Those are all roughly kind of similar, but they do different things. An alpha reader would be somebody, in my estimation, that is reading your book once you've finished it and maybe done a revision, but before it actually goes to a professional editor. Whereas a beta reader would often read the book post-edit, towards the sort of terminal end of its process, perhaps towards in publication, where they're checking this through to make sure that, have I missed anything? Sensitivity readers, on the other hand, are going to be there to protect you from some of the pernicious issues around um, concepts that come up in literature that can be troublesome. They could paint you into a corner as an author who's out of touch or under researched, for example. And there are great examples of why sensitivity readers are important, but the crucial thing there is it can save you from embarrassment further later. So if you have a book that deals with certain types of subject matters, vis-a-vis colonialism or race or things of that nature, talking about religion, those are all areas that a sensitivity reader would do well to advise you in. So next we've got editing. And I bang on about it a lot. And I think it's very much the same thing with like writers associations and editors themselves. It's pretty important. It is the polishing of a rough cut gemstone. Your book being, in this analogy, something of a gem that is not yet refined. So hiring a professional editor ensures your manuscript achieves a level of polish that well-meaning friends or Joe from down the road can't really provide. A skilled editor improves not only the clarity and flow, but also narrative, fact-checking, tone, use of jargon, and any kind of systemic errors that you as an author might have overlooked being too close to your book. It raises it to a high standard. And that's really the thing that I think is important to note about editing. Hiring a professional is the smartest thing you're going to do. Choosing the right editor, however, is another question entirely. You want to find folks that are able to gel with you, either in person or providing kind of like a consultative approach if possible. And usually they would read the book first and provide kind of like a evaluation, an X-ray for your book, right? It's not a surgery as editing might be, but this starts you on the path to understanding where your book's at, but also where the editor is at. And if that's a match for you, you may find that there's not quite the same type of exchange or communication that you were hoping for, and that's fine. And that's something of a litmus test for you to move forward with that editor or not. So the evaluation and how you select that editor is key. Don't just get a generic editor. Editors are kind of like doctors in that they generally have an area of speciality, and that comes hard-earned with years of experience. So investing in the editing that you need. There are a bunch of different types of editing, and some of them are more or less important depending on your genre, length, educational background, right? If you do writing in your career or if you've gone post-secondary for college, university, you may have some base skills already. And so editing might not be as dense or complex for your book. An editor will move through potentially several different stages or types as well, kind of like, in the medical analogy, surgeries, right? There might be different treatments for your book that you may or may not need all of, but usually, a copy edit and a content edit are standard, and a proofread is a nice to have, in my experience. Rewrite as needed and edit again if necessary. It's difficult to have perfect, and I think that whilst we all, in some way, idealize the journey of a perfect book, perfect can be the enemy of good. So try your best to create something that you're proud of, and you can always go back for second edition if you need to. But going through the editing process, it should be thoughtful and it should be deliberate. So for design, same kind of idea here. You want to make sure that the design of your book is something that's both well researched. You have comparison between, say, yourself and the other authors that you might compete against in your field. There are a lot of people publishing every year. It's like 2 million or something like that. And so the quantity of books out there, you want to be creating the shiniest peacock in the jungle. And that means eye-catching covers that are laser focused on grabbing your audience. And so finding the right designer is not just about aesthetics. It's about understanding the market that drives that genre of books. So they might know how to craft a cover that is visually striking and appealing to your genre's audience, and how to format your interior layout for a cohesive, polished look. Professional cover designs can communicate not only your style, but your branding and visual language for the book's content, and perhaps those to come. If you go minimalistic, then you have a particular aesthetic style. Something more complex, fantasy novels like some behind me here, those tend to have more uh, detail and dense cover designs, although trends have changed here and there. And the reason being is that sometimes they want to have a watercolor that tells you all about the world and draws the reader in to think, oh, that guy's cool. What's that elf doing over there? Whereas a book on finance might be pretty, unassuming, and it might have something that's just asking you a question with the big cash symbol on the front kind of thing, right? So it's about finding a designer that matches with your mindset, but knows the ground level on best practices. So designing a captivating cover from back to cover is key here. And you can usually get, designer to create maybe 2 or 3 different cover designs for you, ideally, so that you can do some of that, beta testing with your peer group and friends and family. Your back cover content is also key. Much like the book is judged by its cover, the back cover is something that is the advertisement. It's the use case. It's why this book. And that's something that you'll not just be wanting to kind of pass off or fire into ChatGPT. This should be something both well researched and visceral, right? Done well, your back cover converts casual interest into action, motivating readers to make a purchase or to potentially drive away customers because it was cringe. Format your book's interior, right? A thoughtfully designed interior is essential for creating professional, enjoyable reading experiences. This includes the use of white space, proper spacing on the sides and margin, but also ensuring that the flow naturally from start to finish is something that is cogent. So aside from that, the proper interior formatting ensures that your book looks polished, meets industry standard, and functions well across multiple formats, from print and digital, e-readers to the lauded leather-bound hardcover that you might be splurging on. So optimizing your book for discoverability. Make your book easy to find is crucial for connecting with readers. Enhancing its searchability and classification, and improving its chances of being noticed in a crowded market. A little thoughtful preparation will make sure that your book reaches the right audience and gains the visibility that it richly deserves. Things like, getting ISBNs, choosing the relevant BISAC codes, research relevant search keywords, and complete your book's metadata. Those are all industry jargon terms that can be elaborated on further, but that's just sort of the internal kind of book industry jargon that will ultimately bear out, getting your book connected to the right spot. So ISBNs, each format for your book, ebook, paperback, hardcover, needs its own ISBN. International Standard Book Number is what that stands for. And each is unique, and the serial code, much like an SKU, if you're familiar with retail, is tethered to that product. Choosing your right BISAC codes. So book industry standard communications. Provide one of 3 categories and subcategories. These will tell the retailer or the vendor what they're buying and what kind of category sublistings this might pertain to. Often this is how bookstores are able to make a buying decision on what they are potentially looking for. Researching the relevant keywords here is fairly important. There's a lot of nuance to this. And so you can find professionals to hook you up with the list and make recommendations. Typically an editor will also do this. Complete your book's metadata. Accurate, detailed metadata is necessary for making your book discoverability online. Key details like title, author name, genre, keywords, description help search engines and retailers categorize your book in the right way and improve your chances of reaching your target audience. Be sure to be careful reviewing your metadata, because typos or missing information can absolutely torpedo things. While you can submit corrections, rebroadcasting the information yourself can be tough, and it does create distribution disruption. and visibility awkwardness, because there might be, media that's picked up on it or something with incorrect information. So if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. The distribution strategy. So one of the final steps for your publishing journey is putting your book in the hands of readers. But it's not just about putting it out there. It's about making well-informed choices, from selecting the right platform to pricing each format strategically. Every decision helps your book stand out and attract readers, appeal to retailers, and this will also help you and your story get to the audience it was meant for. To help you find your distribution and pricing strategy, I've narrowed it down to a couple of key decisions. Selecting your preferred printing options, this being print on demand, paperback, ebook, audiobook, what have you. Are you going with an offset print run to facilitate a high quality art book? That's a totally different kettle of fish, but it's definitely the right decision for that project. Also then, setting your price, how much you want to sell this book for. You've already determined how much you want to invest. Now we're looking at, retail and, dollars to donuts. Choosing your book's distribution channels. This is really key. There's a lot of change in distribution lately, partly because of what's happening in the world. And, distributors have had to, much like many places, raise prices and change policies. So you want to make sure that in both researching that, but also making the most competitive decision for your book is key here. Because if you have, for example, returns management, it means that bookstores can purchase the book. And if they don't sell it after the course of several months, they can blow it out for a full refund. And that is what's going to give them something called stock confidence. This is a key principle in retail where it's risk-free. It's free money. Not actually, but sort of. Ensure you have returns management. This ensures that they are able to get product without any risk to their business. Without that, most books that are self-published fail to have a appeal to readers, or rather retailers. So deciding on your printing options, distribution and pricing strategy here, you have two printing options to consider. I'd alluded to print on demand before. This is the kind of predominant methodology in self-publishing, and it can limit some things like how quality the cover images are reproduced at, but it has a lot of really good features. Every press mixes ink a little differently and has its own calibration. So if your project requires extremely specific color, like say cookbooks and stuff like that, you'd be best served to do something else. But for most books, print on demand is going to be the most cost efficient and user-friendly way to get the book out there. Bulk print runs, to which we have a lot of experience providing to as well. Those are printing machines the size of a football field to the size of several pickup trucks, and they are complex, and they don't do small print runs. It's usually a couple of hundred minimum, but usually a couple thousand in color. You have access to custom book features like gloss or foil and gold stamped, debossed, leather bound, all that kind of fun stuff when you're doing more the bulk printing. Ribbon inserts are very popular for commemorative books, for example. Though these books will not be in general distribution, you can differentiate yourself by creating a very high quality book and then going to, say, a secondary distributor, or creating an Amazon account and becoming a vendor yourself. You ship the books to the Amazon warehouse and away you go. So you can do stuff like that, which is a bit more dynamic these days. Setting your price. There's a difficult sensitivity now with pricing, because I think the nostalgia of how inexpensive books used to be versus the now is similar to groceries. So it's getting comfortable with the new normal, so to speak. And most of the children's books I buy are, $20 to $25 Canadian, which, it's not cheap. It's certainly not the $7.99 that I was used to some years ago. Pricing will depend on volume of your stock and the printing cost per unit, things of that nature. You also, of course, want to consider the retailer discount and how much royalty you would want to earn per unit sold. One of the benefits, though, about self-publishing is that you control almost all of these factors. So aim for a competitive price that allows you to meet targets or engage retailers with an acceptable margin of profitability, but also that allows you to make money as well. That's the sort of key compromise in the book trade. So choosing your book's distribution channels, digital platforms and online retailers or local bookstores are all kind of examples, roughly speaking, and it will depend on the type of book that you're doing. Each channel comes with its own benefits and challenges to reach profit maximum and so forth. Keep in mind that each distribution channel handles royalties separately, and they may have minimum payout thresholds. Working with a single distributor, like say Ingram, can simplify this process. Consolidating your distribution not only makes it easier to discuss sales with retailers, but also channels all of your royalty payments in one account, streamlining your bookkeeping. Ensure your books can be returned. I talked about this a little earlier as well, but it's sort of one of those key facets to if a bookstore is expressing interest, or curiosity in your product, that's one of the key questions they're going to be faced with is, if I buy 50 copies of this book, am I going to be stuck with this for the rest of time? So that's key. So publish your book. You've made it. We're here. Before officially releasing your book, take a final moment to review all the last minute bits and pieces. Once everything is in order, you can celebrate your achievement. This is a big deal. Final review. Carefully check your manuscript, design, and metadata for every last detail. This is where beta readers, towards the end of the publication process, can be very helpful. They can find those pernicious little errors that might be there, an orphaned comma or an extra space, stuff like that. Finalize your online listing, crafting a concise and compelling book description. Choose the right categories. Add relevant keywords and include professional author bio. That's really important. People want to know not only about the book, but they don't want to know who you are, the human driving the content. And lastly, publish and announce your release. For some, this is very scary, very nervous, and others have been longing for this moment for, as long as they've been writing. Either way you go, it's a time to celebrate, and it really is something of an achievement because so few people do. So with that said, that's me. And before we go to Q&A, we're now opening the window for our free evaluation giveaway. You can scan the QR code or visit publish.friesenpress.com/checklist. Our editors are some of the most qualified in the industry. Besides their previous education and experience they have to pass an exam, we have built with former presidents of the Editors Association of Canada, and then they take a training to specialize in the different genres that we operate within. And what is an editor's manuscript evaluation, you might ask? Well, it's kind of like an X-ray for your book. It's a complete read-through of your manuscript, and the editor who's selected for the job, they then provide that written feedback to you in totality, right? The evaluation, kind of like a book report or summary review, points out key areas of strength, potential for development, areas for revision, and further discussion possibly for the editor and author. So it's very useful, and it will help in getting you across the hump if you are stuck or unsure. Many authors look for validation. Is my stuff any good? And this would be probably the first step in doing that, and it doesn't overmuch commit to anything. So that's often one of the first things an editor would recommend. So with that, I'll flip over to the next screen for questions, and my friend Brian here will help us out with kind of curating those for us. And yeah, if we can't get to them all, happy to address whatever we can offline as well for you. And thank you so much for joining.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Christoph. Truly so much to cover. Those many steps of self-publishing a book. Many of you are on that journey now, and there is a lot to go through, and that's just to underline it. These are all things that we help with at FriesenPress as well. So, Christoph, would you mind stop sharing the screen there as we get into our Q&A?
You got
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate that. Yeah, keep those questions coming, folks. As you've heard me say many other times in these sessions, if we don't get to your question live, we will follow up afterwards. So don't be shy. There's no bad questions. We're happy to help answer anything that might be on your mind. So with all that being said, let's get into it here. Got a question from Sir Bruce, and I want to start with this because it's something I'm curious about the answer myself. I haven't considered this one before, but can an author set up their own publishing house and use you, as in FriesenPress, I believe, to produce it?
Yes, we have in the past done that for a number of different authors and companies. It depends on the scale. We do white labeling, but also I believe that we have worked with authors who have kind of created their own imprint. I think for some of those, most of them, we've had like the FriesenPress like logo on the book. So it's still technically a FriesenPress book, but that would be a more nuanced discussion. I'd have to check because it's been a while since I've last done one.
Yeah, 100%. It's not the most common thing that we do, but we can definitely look into that for you too, Bruce. But thank you for asking that question. Got a question here from Leanne, who I know has been in several of these sessions. So hi, Leanne. Leanne says, I understand that you need to consult a lawyer when using real place names in your book, things like, I think, real names, period. What branch of law is this?
Yeah, great question. It's tricky because, oftentimes the referencing of materials that are real, people's names, businesses, they can be covered under kind of like libel or copyright. So like a intellectual property or copyright lawyer would be a good one. Defamation and libel is kind of the other side. I'm not a legal expert, but from what I've personally seen and worked on, those are often kind of the two branches that I'm most personally familiar with. In cases that have come up.
Perfect. Well, you're really you're flying through these answers, Christoph. We're almost doing a lightning round here. Have had a couple questions about kind of protecting one's work. One from Monica and another one from James. So I'll kind of try to synthesize these two. Monica asked, how do you approach utilizing beta and alpha readers in protecting your work, and then in brackets NDA. And James also asked, how does one protect their manuscript from being copied? And I think that's a pretty common concern with folks. It's your manuscript's your baby, and you've spent a lot of time in it. You don't want that work to be stolen. So if you can speak on that a bit.
Absolutely, comes up a lot. So protecting your work is absolutely worthwhile. I think that doing a copyright registration for your IP is a good start. You can do that by registering the kind of finished manuscript, assuming it is finished and typed up, with the library archives, or if you're in the United States, the Congressional Library, I believe it's called. Something like that. I double check, but it's a thing. So you can register for intellectual property. The difference being is that you're protecting the idea and not the product. So usually what we would see is kind of two different sort of copyrights, sometimes even three. You've got a trademark, which is crazy and very complicated. You've got a product copyright, which is a good deal more straightforward, but that happens kind of after publication. And that's when it's submitted to, Library of Congress or what have you. So in those cases, right, it's kind of registering, as I understand it, like the product and the ISBNs and the things that are associated with that. Whereas an intellectual property copyright is protecting your idea, right? And so you can do that right now, today, for like, I don't know, $30, something like that. Watch it be 200. It's probably more expensive, but it used to be cheap, like everything. So yeah, I mean, you can do that, and that can, at least at a fundamental level, protect things. Nobody wants to take anybody to court, especially over something like this, which is heartbreaking. So my recommendation, part of the best practices in working with writers associations, writers groups, is that they have a kind of a collective security or safety agreement, radical candor, expectations around things like copyright, theft, etc. You're in a trusted brother and sisterhood, right? So don't rip people off, don't expect to be ripped off in return kind of thing. There's usually in these groups, they sometimes have like a charter, which you have to sign, which discloses, X, Y, Z, but not always. And so when you are engaging your alpha readers or your beta readers, having that candid conversation with them up front in advance is both important and necessary. I think that having some kind of agreement in place, maybe not even so much like a legally binding NDA per se, but like just like, I'm going to be a good person, you be a good person is a good fundamental agreement. It doesn't like protect you on paper, but not to get too much into the weeds, it's going to depend on how deeply engaged you are with these folks. An editor, for example, is covered under their business practice, right? You're commissioning them to do a service. They're in turn standard practice, not going to give your stuff away. So there's layers to the answer.
For sure. No, that was a great one, Christoph. Thank you for that. I have a question here from Elaine, who asks, I'm at the very beginning of collecting a group of poems to publish. What volume of poems would I need to warrant publishing? And I think this is a good opportunity to maybe talk about minimum page count and things of that nature, which I know kind of comes up, and especially relevant today with AI kind of fake books being more of a thing than they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, don't get me started on AI fake books. Oof. Yeah, so for poetry, usually I would say 30 poems, 30 pages is kind of your minimum. 24 pages is usually the minimum for printing books. They're actually usually manufactured in groupings of 8, roughly speaking. So, like a 30-page book is technically a 32-page book. But I would recommend whenever writing a book or whenever planning a book, don't go for minimum. Don't go for bare minimum because, 30 poems is very short. And the value proposition for that is that it's tiny, tiny. And it's going to be really hard for people to see that on the shelf. You might not even have the spine thick enough to have your name or title printed on the side if it's that thin. So I would err on comparable other titles within the sort of poetics genre. So things like maybe 50 to 100 poems is pretty standard. I've got like James Joyce and Ezra Pound in my library behind me, and they're both collected works of about that size.
Perfect. I'm just pulling up the URL again for anyone who was looking for that to enter our manuscript evaluation giveaway. So I'll drop that in the chat shortly, folks. I know a couple of you are asking. And yes, Nora, that box that you just typed in is where you ask a question. I had a question here about metadata in BISAC from Kara, and they asked where that data appears, which I think is a great question because it's a bit more of a behind the scenes thing than might meet the eye. So can you speak on that?
Yeah. So like the BISAC information would normally be something disclosed from the publisher to the distributor to the retailer. So I don't think that much of that is accessible to folks on the street, civilian type thing. It's more business to business back of house. And so with that, there's not a ton of transparency on that aside from if you're interfacing with publisher to distributor or retailer. But if you, for example, get a recommendation from your editor or from a professional to have these BISACs or these keywords, those go into the kind of listing material that would be provided to a distributor.
Nice. Thanks, Christoph.
Yeah, you got it.
I had a question here, and it's not something I don't think we've actually ever covered this on our webinars, but it was about board books and how those are or aren't able to be produced. That was asked by Sam.
For
publishing.
I love a good board book. One of my favorites is Hug Machine. Back when my youngest son was a bit smaller, he's 4 now, but Hug Machine's great. Everybody should check it out. I'm not taking any payments for this. I'm not sponsored by Hug Machine, but board books are really cool. The challenge with board books is they are very expensive to manufacture, and they don't behave as much like standard book production. For example, book production typically uses paper on like giant toilet paper roll type things. It's a huge roll of paper. Whereas much of the board book production is actually manufactured in specialized presses and then cut out using tools and dies. It's why you see so many of these board books with like cutouts or bits and bobs inside them. Very fun, very expensive. Most of the manufacture of those products is in places like Mexico, Sri Lanka. I think China is obviously a big manufacturer of them as well. There might be one or two still in North America, kind of churning out smaller runs, but it's very much a boutique industry, similar to pop-up books. Highly specialized, requiring both complex engineering and a ton of manufacturing equipment that's specific to it. So whilst it's not a separate industry, it's almost a totally separate product line. So not a lot of printers do that kind of thing. I'm a big fan of it, but the cost is somewhat prohibitive. And, upfront for a new author to start out with a board book can be daunting. There's a lot of moving parts to figure out, including things like international shipping of large scale production runs, warehousing, sourcing a distributor, just to name a few. So I wouldn't put you off on it. I would simply say that it's a big undertaking, and in the sort of level of complexity, it's on the higher end of the chain.
Awesome. Got kind of surprising to me a number of questions about citations. So a few people have been asking about this, and maybe I'll pull Carly's question here. For nonfiction ebooks set up like workbooks for nutrition, I've referenced blogs and articles. If these are fully cited, shout outs to the original authors and all, encouraging users to visit those websites, is there still a risk of copyright infringement?
Great question. Caveat, I'm not a legal professional. This is not legal advice. That being said, I've seen a lot of stuff happening in the space with that lately. One of the challenges, of course, is that copyright references are different in academic publishing than in commercial publishing. For example, if I'm writing an essay for my university, as long as I cite my source, generally speaking, and follow the style manuals and so forth, we're good. However, if you are a commercial publication, like if you are a book that is for sale as a product, it starts to behave differently. And one of those key distinctions is that you could get in trouble because you haven't asked for permission. There are a multitude of sort of landmines that are just waiting for authors who are saying, well, I did my best to get permission and I included this quote of Oprah and everything should work out fine. Dicey, right? So like definitely you want to talk to an editor early about your plans. And if you have any kind of defamatory or libelous content, like if you're making fun of people or impugning their reputation, bear in mind that that could put you in the crosshairs of legal proceedings. So you want to make sure that the nature of your content is focused around, either positivity or some degree of uplift. And two, you want to check with the source, preferably in writing, to confirm that you're okay to use it. If you don't get permission, it can complicate things a lot because you could get struck with a cease and desist. People could pull your book. It gets gnarly. So my recommendation is cross your T's, dot your I's. This goes additionally for when you are using things like URLs or website links like a blog, because one of the craziest things about the internet is it moves fast. And the URL of today might be outmoded in 6 months or less. So putting an actual link in your book could just break. It could just not work anymore because web domain switches or something. So I recommend maybe having that on a blog for your author website or something. And that way it can be updated dynamically, because once it's in print or an ebook, it's a little bit more tricky to do.
Awesome. Well, we are about at time. I did just want to mention for a few of the folks who are asking for guidelines about number of pages for different books in different genres or word counts and what have you. We've written a few blog posts about this topic. Somewhat unhelpfully, I will say. The answer is usually it kind of depends, depending on the type of story you're telling, the type of genre you're writing in. There's a range basically, but I'll make sure that people asking those questions are linked to those resources, because they're out there and they might be helpful. And there's a lot of nuance and layers to that, so it might be kind of tough to answer live. But I did also just want to say thank you all for being here. Truly, so many questions in the chat. I hope we provided some good value and good answers to some of those questions, but really appreciate seeing so many repeat folks here for these sessions, and really means a lot to us that you take some time out of your day to learn and give us some good fodder to share publishing wise. So I'll pass it over to Christoph for a little sign off, but just wanted to say thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Much appreciated. Also, the quarterbacking on the Q&A there. It's a finicky thing that I sometimes have to do on the side with a separate keyboard. So it's great to have help. Thank you so much all for joining us. If you do have questions further, don't hesitate to reach out. We're friendly, we don't bite, and there's no cost or kind of any further engagement required. That being said, writing is often a lonely journey. So if you are struggling, if you're kind of running on vapors, or if you're just thinking, what do I do next? The best advice I can give you, like top advice, check out your local writing association, right? Most of those are free or like a $10 a year membership, and they're going to be able to answer a lot of these questions as well. They do focus groups, they do manuscript development, all that kind of stuff. Community is one of the best things about being a writer, whether it's NaNoWriMo or festivals or anything like that. So check it out. Your local area, it may be a small town or a big city, but if you go to Google and type in, Elephant's Breath Montana Writers Group, you may find that there's one. And I just recommend that, being part of that community can be very self-assuring, because other people are struggling with their writing. Other people are out there wondering the same questions, and you do have resources. So plug that in and tune in next time. And thank you once again for joining.
Absolutely. Yeah, great tips to edit off, Christoph. And when you're ready to move that book to a manuscript, ready for that manuscript to become a book, you know where to find us. So thanks again, everyone. See you next month, and be well.